Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage LJ Rich.
Yes, that's me. Hello, and welcome. Good afternoon. Welcome back to our 5th of 7 panels. And like the others, it's a good one. Let's welcome our panelists on stage. That's a clap. Yeah, let's give them a clap. Thank you, audience. I know it's been a long day for you. We did say at the beginning it was quite packed. And the thing is all of it is really very well worth listening to, and I admire your staying power. Coffee is a wonderful thing, and remember, stay hydrated as we carry on with our next session, which specializes in the rich and creative ecosystem that surrounds esports. It's a chance to learn how cutting-edge entertainment platforms are incorporating every type of creative expression available into the gaming experience. And as ever, we're going to allow each panelist to introduce themselves and what they do. Plus, this time, I'm going to ask, if you feel comfortable, to please share what you're currently listening to, watching, or playing. So let's start with the president of the GEF's Pan Am Development Federation, Mario.
Thank you, LJ, and welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Mario Cilenti, as LJ mentioned, president of the Pan American Esports Development Federation. My real job is I also look after the organization of the Pan American Games and the South American Games. So a pleasure to be here. And as to what I am playing lately, I'm trying to get back to my paddle game. Paddle is a sport not many people know, perhaps some people in Spain or South America. It's almost like tennis, but you play in a cube. It's sort of like squash, 4 players, lots of fun, lots of energy.
Wow, that was an answer nobody was expecting. I think thank you very much. Stefy, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, my name is Stefy Bao. I am originally Italian and a former motocross racer. I used to race motorcycle for a living. Now I own Init Esports, and we create esports event for sim racing. So if you have a chance, the simulator out there, those are mine and my partners, and come and try them. What I'm playing right now, of course, sim. That's what I do.
Thank you very much, Stefy. Okay, next up, let's hear from Sarah. What do you do? What you're currently listening to as well?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Well, for me, it's a real honor to be part of the Global Esports Forum. Tremendous day so far, and it's been really insightful and exciting, and hopefully for you guys too. I was an Olympian in physical sport, alpine skiing, and I then had the pleasure to be able to continue from being a full-time athlete to actually working and having a career in the sports administration, and became the Secretary General, the CEO of the International Ski Federation, which I served for 22 years. So since the last 12 months, following the Beijing 2022 Olympic Winter Games, I've now been contributing back to the entire sports ecosystem, doing various different things, like getting involved with fantastic events like the Global Esports Forum, different other sports engagement events, safeguarding, security, education. That's a big piece. Sport really is an education for life. And when I say sports, I mean all types of sports. Physical and esports, they really give you so much education for your life. And education is power. And here in the sports world, we're very much aligned to that. So when am I playing? I'm doing general sport and exercise to keep myself in what I try to think is reasonably good shape every day. That really is important. And I listen to podcasts. I am a huge podcast listener when I'm working out. This morning, I was listening actually to the Global Brand Partnerships Director for EA Sports, who was having a really cool podcast, and was a great education for this panel.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks very much. My goodness. Brian's up next. Hi.
Hi, everyone. Brian Mirakian, Senior Principal and Director of Esports and Digital Entertainment for Populous. For those of you that may not know who Populous is, we design, and we're privileged to design some of the most iconic sports venues from around the world. Here in the United Kingdom, you might know of Tottenham Hotspur's new stadium, and Emirates Stadium, where Arsenal plays, and the 2012 Olympic main stadium, which is now home to West Ham United. So we are really honored to work with some great organizations around the world to bring these iconic venues to life, but most importantly, what it means to fans, and what it means to the fan experience, and the spectator experience, and the competitor experience. And for us, what we have been able to do, and what my role is to really translate what we have learned in traditional sports over the years into what this emerging digital entertainment space presents for us. And what you're seeing here at the Commonwealth Games, in terms of a live event that's taking place in the next few days ahead of us, is a really great indicator of what's going to be in front of us for many decades to come, as esports becomes a vital part of international competitions, but continues to be a mainstream part of our overall society as we bring fans and athletes together. So very excited to speak with you all today in terms of what I'm playing. I get smoked by my 14-year-old in Rocket League on a daily basis, so that's really fun. And then we're watching a lot of Stranger Things. So there you go.
Who hasn't been smoked by a 14-year-old in Rocket League? That's what we want to know. Thank you very much. Okay, Phil, you're up next.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Phil Smith. I'm the Partnerships Director at Sport England. As you might guess from the title, we're having a busy week here at the moment. For those of you who haven't noticed, the Commonwealth Games is happening in this wonderful city of Birmingham, and the England team is doing very well. As well as enjoying the sport that's going on in the city, get the chance to have a look if you can. Sport England's job is about movement. It's about helping the nation in England to be more active. We've got a physical activity crisis in the Western world at the moment, and that's true also in England. We all need to move a bit more. Doesn't have to be sport, doesn't have to be paddle, doesn't have to be football or any of the wonderful sports you can see in the city. We just got to move more to benefit our long-term health, to benefit our communities, to benefit all of us. So that's the task for Sport England. The reason I'm interested in being here today is the crossover between esports and traditional sport. We've got these two great events going on in this city at the same time. I'm really interested to know, what is the link? What is the crossover? What can we do together? How can we use esports to get us all perhaps moving a bit more and more physically fit? So the question of what I'm playing or listening to, I do like a game of paddle, so we'll talk. Recently, I was on a family holiday in Berlin, in Germany, if anybody's here from that great city. And while my 18-year-old son was touring the techno clubs of Berlin, I was listening to David Bowie.
There's the generational gap there. Thanks very much. That's brilliant. And there's nothing wrong with David Bowie, actually, or touring the techno clubs of Berlin. So I guess I sit happily as a crossover right there. Okay, thank you, Phil. It's time for Asahi. Hello there.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name's Asahi Takano. I am a partner and head of Asia for Portas Consulting. Portas Consulting, we're a leading global consultancy specializing in sport. And so my day-to-day involves working with sports ministers, presidents of federations, CEOs of sports business, etc., to help them tackle the most pressing and strategic issues around sport. One thing that's key to our mission as a company has always been a societal component. So we've always thought about sport for the benefit of society, harnessing the power of sport, etc. And it's in that vein that we're also very, very privileged and pleased to be the strategic partners to GEF, and working with Paul and the team to think through and make the most of this fantastic opportunity that GEF has in front of them. I think from my perspective, what I'd be keen to share and think about is the views of the traditional sports leaders, I think, and their engagement and their needs of eSport, I think, are clear. But the way they're doing that, the why they're doing that, and how they're doing that, I think, is still something where the clarity is not there. And in many ways, I think organizations such as the GEF and actually our community here has a really important responsibility to try to work with traditional sports to help them find that collaboration, that win-win. And I think it reflects some of what Phil's saying about the importance of physical activity. We also talked all day about the great things that we have in the esports community that is unique to us in terms of non-discrimination, inclusivity, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think in order to really fulfill that potential, I think one key part of that solution involves helping the sports community to unlock that collaboration. In terms of what am I guess watching is allowed as well.
Yeah.
So as a long-suffering season ticket holder of the only decent club in North London, Tottenham, obviously. Sarah, you look offended. I am really looking forward to taking this opportunity that happens to coincide with the first game of the season tomorrow. So I'll be at White Hart Lane watching Tottenham hopefully beat Southampton.
Perhaps the two of you can battle it out with the virtual taekwondo in that sort of darkened media room.
That sounds like a plan.
I'm up
Take you on,
for it.
Sarah.
Oh my goodness, what have we started? Okay, thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is ask each of you a question again, and then we'll get the discussion going. I think that's the best way forward. So Mario, back to you. You've worked across international sport at the highest level. So where do you think things are changing in and around this area?
Well, definitely, it is a changing world. The pandemic has really accelerated that change positively for esports. I think there's room for both esports and traditional sports. The question that we were talking backstage and everybody really wants to know, and I'm sure the audience would like to know our opinion, is who needs who? What is the Olympics? Will esports ever be in the Olympics? Will there be an additional sport called esports? Will there be an esport Olympics? I mean, that's really the key question. But for me, the way the Olympic movement is going and being organizing and in the Olympic world for over 30 years now, Sarah, you can relate to this, is does the Olympics need esports or does esports need the Olympics? I mean, I think that is a question that we should all ask ourselves. Because Olympics right now, they're at a level that we all know, the elite squad. There's something happening chasing the Olympics. The Olympics are now looking at new sports, new, more active sports, sports that capture the audience of the youth. What better than esports to do that? So that's one of those things that we need to start looking at is who needs esports, who needs that conjunction together more so. I think in different regions of the world, we've already seen that. In Asia, for example, esports is already part of the Asian Games. Working in the Pan American Games and the South American Games, we will be doing the South American Esports Championships in a very similar fashion as we're doing here. We're working towards doing the same thing next year for the Pan American Games. So the movement is starting to grow. In Africa, things are moving and growing as well. The future is uncertain, but I think, and I look at Sarah, she wants to jump right in. I think that the time is now. The time is now for esports to make that jump and show that, all the esports players, the athletes, they need a support system the same way elite athletes in traditional sports. They share their coaches, their hours of training, their mental health. They have physical. It's unbelievable how much similarity there is in one to the other. So I don't see why there couldn't be.
Thank you. I'm going to let you jump in if you had something to say.
I sure do, and Mario has been very eloquent in terms of how he's presented the situation, who needs who. Well, basically, both can benefit without any shadow of a doubt. That the Olympics is about stronger together. And when only part of the society are involved actually in a practical way with the Olympics and have a real interest in it, then why not open it all up for everybody? And it's a whole new segment of society, and fantastic. And both sides will really be able to benefit, no question. So it expands the whole footprint of the Olympics and can raise its profile that it's really is something for absolutely everybody. And yeah, there's a lot of benefits.
Thank you. Asahi.
Yeah, just to chime in on that, I think I do feel that we're at a watershed point in the industry. I think up to now, frankly, sport, I would say, was quite happy in its own world. And, esport was a bit of a distraction, I guess. Now, I feel like there's an inexorable tide that is not going to stop. Esports has the momentum. And if you look at all sport, I'm not even talking Olympics, but all sport, you're seeing year on year, basically, the depletion of their audience and moving only older. So basically, all the traditional sports, their demographic curve is shifting to the right. And you see a recent thing I read, I think it was something like 42% of 13 to 24-year-olds have no interest in sport, right? And the rest population average is about 25. So if you play that through, I think actually to your question or your point, Mario, about who needs who more, frankly, I think right now it's the sports that need esports more than the other way around, insofar as I believe, as we've seen today, esports will quite happily grow at this ridiculous pace that we're growing at. And every year that passes, a new generation will join that, population and the fan base. So I actually think the shoe's slightly on the other foot now. And when I talk to sports leaders, what I hear is almost a recognition of we've got to do something with esports. But actually, we've got to remember, we always talk about that we can collaborate and it's a win-win and so on and so forth. But ultimately, there is a finite pool of eyeballs and a finite pool of time, interest, and ultimately, that's the fuel that drives, be it sports or esports from a commercial point of view, etc. And so I think there is definitely a concern across the sports industry and the recognition there of we've got to somehow tap into that market, we've got to somehow figure that out. And I think some sports have, asked the right question, which is why? Why do we need to do that, and why do we want to use these sports beyond just thinking because we just need eyeballs, we need to get to Gen Z, we need to get to a new population. I think I was talking to Jerry from Taekwondo earlier, and I think they had a very, very clear sense of there are several very clear purposes where the esports version will benefit their sport, help reach new audiences, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, I'm sure Stefy will talk about that as well. But without that clarity, I think there's a bit of a scrabbling panic of feeling of being left out and must do something. And I think that's where our community could probably step up a bit more to really help think together what is it that actually for every sport, which has a unique need, a unique demographic base and so on, the esports solution that's right for them, that helps to create the win-win that we are always talking about.
It's almost like taking a magnanimous and collaborative approach, as opposed to, well, you're lucky we're even talking to you. I think it's really interesting. There is a move away from passive consumption in traditional media as well as sport. People do want to be interacting more, and there's an opportunity there, isn't there? Especially with these extended reality plays. Obviously, simulation has been very briefly mentioned, and Stefy, please elaborate further.
Yes, so we do have a case study now happening with simulation, with sim racing. We have, I was just this past weekend at a 24-hour of Spa, which is a 24-hour car race. At that event, we have organized the sim racing event in conjunction. So what was happening there, you had the real car driver, they were competing to get points for the real race, to compete on the Friday into the simulator. And they were just duplicating the same track, so the same move. So not only it is an opportunity to gain points for their own championship, but it is also a very good way to practice. So now simulating games, so in this particular sport, gives you an opportunity for more practice, and therefore opens up the door to different people to be able to start be part of the sport. Racing as a whole is very expensive, so therefore now with simulator and esport, we're opening up the door for everybody. So now anybody in the world has maybe that kind of passion, they can just give it a try at a fraction of the price. So therefore, it's a way to connect the two, so the digital world and the in real life. Also, I am a former racer, and my career ended. So now with simulator, I can have the same feeling of when I used to race. So it goes backwards, the same also, So it's not from the bottom up, so getting a new generation to be involved with the sport, but it's also, like as a former professional athlete, now I can maybe play with family members that they maybe didn't even watch me race, right? So it becomes like a very tight community, and I think it's very important what eSport can do for all the sport, and sim racing is an example.
Yeah, it kind of democratizes something that would otherwise be quite exclusive. I definitely want to have a go later on. I mean, Sarah, you grew up with the original arcade video games, didn't you? How do you think they relate to current e-sport activities? Have you seen some parallels? Have you learned some interesting things during your time with us?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up, and I don't know if there's anyone in the audience who can remember that far back in the early 1970s with Pac-Man. And
Can we see a show of hands who's ever played a game of Pac-Man? So look, everyone is with you.
Well, Pac-Man, that was the thing. Huh? And, there was a physical skill to it, because the higher the level you got, the faster you had to move and the faster you had to react. And for sure, this was challenging, and you were competitive. And these are the basic elements today of esports. These are the basic elements of sport as such as well. You're challenging yourself, your skills. You had to be skillful in terms of being able to move quicker and quicker and react quicker and quicker. And for sure it was fun. And that's what it's about, right? It's about also having fun and finding something that you can really focus on and challenge yourself and try to do better next time. That's the fundamental roots of sport as well. Yeah. And practice makes perfect.
The incremental improvements. And I
Absolutely.
think the old style video games were basically you play something to failure, you would inevitably lose. But now we're seeing like a real collection of collaborative games, competitive games that are almost, I feel, in the style of old board games. If you look at the game of chess, you've got the early game, the mid game, the end game. So it's really interesting what's going on there. I'm going to move over to Phil because it feels like it's a natural time to get into infrastructure. I've seen your concept videos. I know you're familiar with the city, having studied right here in Birmingham. And bringing Sport England here must have been a bit of a special experience. Can you hang on, I've just realised something. I mean, Brian. I have something called face blindness. It's called prosopagnosia. And so sometimes I can't recognize people very easily. It's a neurological condition which is completely irrelevant unless I'm in situations like this. So let me start again. Brian, my question to you is much more relevant. It's about the esports village concepts that I saw that were absolutely mind-blowing. Your visions made total sense back then. Years ago, when it came to imagining gaming arenas, even looking behind us, this absolutely fabulous set, it's not out of place on a rock concert. It's that experience, isn't it? So I would like you to tell us more about how architecture plays its part in the Spectator experience, and then we'll go over to Phil for infrastructure. There we go.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's been really exciting about imagining the possibilities around esports and gaming is that it has been really completely new territory. We're still very much in a state of infancy. And so as a designer, one of the things that excites me more than anything is to create a vision for the future and to look into the crystal ball as far as we can to see what's potentially on the horizon. When we developed that concept that you just referenced, we were looking at really kind of a convergence of a lot of different activities. And at that time, it was like, gosh, probably 7 years ago, that we began to sort of imagine a place that would exist that would essentially be an intersection of gaming, culture, entertainment, a place for live events to take place, hospitality, living space, training space, places for laboratories of innovation, places for publishers to activate unique experiences, and ultimately to create an amazing place for fans to gather, and for the next generation of gamers to live together and ultimately develop. I think what's been interesting to see over the course of the last 6-7 years from that point is how many of those ideas have actually, come to some level of fruition. And I think what really I find very encouraging and exciting is that the athletes today, and they very much are athletes, right? Are high performance. They're high performance athletes. So the competitors that you'll see tomorrow, no longer is this just the kind of stereotypical, gamer that is in, the basement and, playing by themselves and that sort of thing. These teams and these professional organizations are investing millions and millions of dollars into basically building teams and competitors that train and live every day like an athlete in the EPL, NFL, NBA, right? And mental acuity, nutrition, sleep, behavioral patterns around psychology, so they can, when they perform on that stage, they're competing at that level. That's inherently so critical. We're working with the NBA 2K League right now. And the other phenomenon that's becoming more and more important is that we create the environments for competition that allow them to step onto stage and to be able to cope with playing in front of a live audience. So when we were working with the NBA 2K League, we designed their venue for their season 5. There were competitors that had not played in front of a live audience for 2 years during the pandemic, right? They didn't know how to cope with that moment, right? Now imagine when you step into an arena in front of 25,000 people, or into Houston Energy Stadium in front of 45,000 people for a League of Legends event. These are the sort of things that we need to be thinking about, not only as designers, but as we host and put on these events in terms of what are those sort of environments that create and foster positivity and ultimately growth. But one of the things that I would just close with is just simply to say that what's very exciting is when you look at the developers and publishers that are producing games. I read something the other day from a C-suite person at Riot that stated that essentially every game that Riot's going to produce moving in the future is going to be based around a competitive format. That's really, really encouraging, because what that means, of course, is that they're looking at the success of League of Legends, of Valorant, and they see the power of the live experience. And they see the power of the content that originates from live experience and what that means in terms of the magic of fans like you all and gamers. And when they come together, that's truly magical. But it's also really critical in terms of the propelling growth around esports as an industry, and ultimately where we're headed. Not only today, 2-3 years from now, but many decades to come, because that to me is when we talk about what is, and we see it every day in terms of the power of traditional sports. Look at what just occurred at the UEFA Championship, right? The largest gathering of any fans in Europe to watch any championship event for UEFA title, and the Lionesses brought it home. That was really cool. But think about that in terms of esports. Moving down the road, we have that opportunity, right? It's right in front of us, but it's just going to take a lot of planning and attention to those details of fans, competitors alike coming together in those sort of environments.
So it's sort of maximizing that peak experience feeling, not just for the fans, but also for the players. And it's very fascinating how architecture does play a part, because even things like the acoustics, does something feel intimate and friendly, or does it feel intimidating and echoey? And things like that. It's absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much, Brian. Okay, well, Phil, I've teased your question here about infrastructure, and you are the person that studied right here in Birmingham, aren't you? So please tell us a little bit more about what you would like Sport England's message to be to the wider world.
Well, that's a big question.
Thanks.
As you've heard me say already, Sport England's mission is called Uniting the Movement. And the words are very carefully chosen, because movement is something we can all benefit from. And as I said earlier, it doesn't have to be Olympic or even Commonwealth or national level sport. It's just about moving your body a bit more. I think I've got a challenge for esports there, if you'll forgive me with this audience. I don't know much about esports, I'm willing to confess. I know a lot about sport. And although I could talk for the rest of the day about the benefits of sport, I also know we're getting a lot of things wrong in our 150 years or so of development. And I would really like to see esports, which is in its infancy relatively, to avoid some of the mistakes that sport has made. And I'm talking about governance, which might instantly put a lot of people to sleep in the room. But I'm talking about how decisions are made, and corruption. I'm talking about exclusion of people, whether it's based on gender or race or background or sexual preference, etc., or ability, disability. Sports got a lot of these things wrong over many years. We are working really hard on it, but we're coming from quite some way back, and we're trying to fix things, problems that we created ourselves. What I would say to the esports community is you've got a fabulous opportunity not to go down some of those roads, to make sure that this wonderful world that you're creating is inclusive and is accepting and has the people in charge who will make the right decisions for the future of the thing that you love. It might seem really boring when all you're interested in is playing the game or watching the game, but ultimately it's the consumers, the players, the spectators who suffer because of the decisions that are made at the top. So I'm interested to know from anyone in the room who is closer to esports than I am, how is that being considered? How is that being tackled? Can you avoid making some of the mistakes that traditional sport has made over the last 150 years?
That's a very good question. I mean, I look forward to the day that we don't have to discuss diversity and things like that, where it's just no big deal. And one day we will be there, and certainly with that sort of sentiment, we're on our way. Thank you. Stefy, you're nodding your head over.
Yes, I have to say that in my experience, what I feel from the gaming community is that the issue is not there with the gamers. You know, because they are young. You know, young people, they grow up by saying, hey, we are all on this herd together. We need to play here because that's our passion. So why putting these etiquettes on people? You know, so I think the community per se is very open-minded, you know, like, and wants to be inclusive. The bigger problem, like we have in life, is that sometimes it's not from the bottom up that you have the problem, it's from the top down. So in my particular case, I have to say I am a gay woman, and I have raised a very male-dominated sport. So I try to break that glass ceiling a lot. I was able to win 3 world titles. What I do after my career, I'm there and talk to all the women and every minority out there and say, you can do it too. I did it, and I'm not different than you. So for me, the very important part is like we can be example. So it's important to be, if you can see it, you can be it. And this is a phrase that Billie Jean King in the United States put it out there, and I wanted to say to anybody that is involved in this industry, take that phrase, bring a representation, because the more we try to put people out there and seeing that it can be done, then we can make that change a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I would also like to add that it isn't necessarily one particular industry that does this. I would say that it's the whole of society, and maybe we get the opportunity to influence it just a little bit with our own positive outlooks. Okay, thank you very much.
Can I add something to
sure, please.
what Phil was saying? Phil, the Global Esports Federation was founded about 3 years ago, and because a lot of, on the board, there's people from the Olympic movement, there's corporate people, some people from esports, and what we've achieved in 3 years, there's a number, we have a structure about 18, 19, correct me, somebody if I'm wrong, different commissions. So we have Health and Wellness Commission, we have Women in Sport Commission, we have an Athletes Commission, we have everything to do with diversity, looking at everything to do with making sure that we do our due diligence with governance, everything to do, every member federation that we admit into the Global Esports Federation, that we allow and give the temporary membership is, they have to tick off a number of things. And one of the key things is to make sure that the values of that member federation coincides with the value of the Global Esports Federation. So it's a start. We have the regional federations, the Pan American one, we have one in Africa, we have one in Oceania. And part of the job that we do is to reach out to ensure that the health and wellness and everything that the players need, all of the education part, everything's there so that we can support them as much as we can at a global level. Of course, then we need the regional and even at a local level to help out. But from the Global Esports Federation, we're really trying to push that message.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Asahi, it's really refreshing to see that sports media are engaging more with esports. Obviously, this weekend we can see there are changes afoot, driven in part, as we all know, by the pandemic accelerating our reliance on digital. I would like to know what your thoughts are, because I suspect that you've seen a lot of data in this area.
Yeah, I mean, I think almost just sort of stepping back for a moment, the challenge or the interesting thing that's happening is esports is truly disruptive to sport in the fact that it operates on a completely different model. So if you think about traditional sports, it's federations, it's funding, it's competitions, it's elite, it's grassroots, it's blah, blah, blah. And there's a very clear structure around it, very clear governance, et cetera, et cetera. And reflecting what Phil was saying, you know, there was a clear commercial model, there's a clear governance model, et cetera, and that's evolved over a long time. And then all of a sudden, esports comes along where basically there's a new sport every 6 months, potentially, that someone else owns and controls. You know, there is, up to now, I think, not been a really clear platform on which the dialogue has been able to be had between sport and esports, because the language barrier, I think, has been quite high. And I think to Mario's point, Global Esports Federation, I think, has filled that gap in a very, very important way by at least shaping some of the language that's referenced and used by sport, and enabling a platform for that dialogue, which I think is just, you know, absolutely crucial. But looking ahead, I think, you know, as the pandemic has shown, the number of people, I think, that suddenly basically recognize the importance of physical activity to their mental health and well-being was astounding. And I think there has been a legacy, a positive legacy from that, that has just about kept going and hopefully will keep going. But as Phil says, we are in a world where the tide is against being physically active and healthy, and unfortunately it's towards obesity and inactivity. And so I think, as I was saying earlier, I was saying that sport needs e-sport more than the other way around. But as responsible, you know, stewards, I guess, of esports and the generations to come, I think it is absolutely important that we do find ways to maintain a healthy and, you know, active population of youth that can excel in and do all the great things that esports does, but also maintain a healthy lifestyle. And from that perspective, I think that is the one really important part that sport can provide a template for that, and a natural way to find an avenue for that. And I think that's where, again, the GEF's role, I think, is really critical in, you know, providing a language that sport can engage in, but also I think sport needs to lean in to hear, to really start to understand what is the format, what is the specific need. So talking to, again, just the Taekwondo example, I asked the question, why do you need an e-version of this when actually it's a one-to-one combat sport, right? So why do you need to be on opposite sides of the room to do this when actually the whole point is you're sparring each other? And he said, there's a really interesting thing, which is actually a lot of parents nowadays don't want their kids getting kicked, right? Really simple point, but actually it's about that. And because of that, and we know parents are really important to deciding what activities kids do, something like this enables the kids to still train, to still learn all the good things about it without actually having to always be in physical fights and getting hurt. And that's an example of a really good why it works for both. And I think, you know, the example with the Sims is exactly the same. And I think that's where I really feel that the GEF has an important role to play. And I think, as Mario says, our commissions and so on. And let's not recreate sport either here, I think, is an also important thing. As Phil says, there's so much we can learn, and we really shouldn't, you know, make the same mistakes, and we can leapfrog that. But I think it is important to recognize there are fundamental differences in the business models, as it were, and we need to try to find that bridge.
I mean, at this point, Sarah, I'm sure you're waiting for me to ask you about World Cup ski racing e-game. and how it's been accepted in the ski community, people who actually use real skis.
Yeah, this was a fantastic project to introduce at the International Ski Federation in January 2019. Yeah, not so long ago, but a lifetime away when we all think of what's been going on the last couple of years. But that, of course, has accelerated it. And effectively, the esport game, this democratized the entire community. One of the drawbacks of winter sports, of skiing, of snowboarding, is the fact that you need a certain environmental condition when it comes to winter, when it comes to snow, when it comes to ice, and we all have to do a heck of a lot to make sure that we take care of our planet, because this is one of the areas that's absolutely fundamental to society now. With esport, you haven't got that challenge. There are many parts of the world that never have a chance to participate in snow sports. And through esports, wow, suddenly this whole entire world was opened up to them. Then you have the next problem, cost. So winter sports involves traveling, it involves equipment, lessons. It's a pretty complicated world. And the fact was that these courses were the original courses. They were all designed based on those courses. The equipment, the actual equipment. And you could make an investment in getting higher tech, and this would give you some advantages in terms of the lines you were able to reach to emulate the best athletes. And the athletes were totally into it. It was really, really exciting to see not only the actual physical community getting involved and really having great fun, but also to empower an entire part of the world and a segment who otherwise would never have the chance to participate. I mean, you know, in Singapore, there aren't too many opportunities to be able to do snow sports, right? Whereas, you know, the fantastic esports players who would come and show up, and there were participants from 170 nations. And member federations of the International Federation, well, by the time I left, there was 133. There's a few more now. But, hey, this interest from around the entire planet was just tremendous. And the goal that we had as a federation, and Asahi, it's a very important point and should be the basis really for all major events and for all federations, is the why. Why do I do this? It's not how I do it. Everyone knows that, or what I do, but it's why? What's the purpose? Not just because everyone else does it. And, well, this was such a clear message in terms of why. To reach out to parts of the world, to create further interest. And we did have one more bottom line, and I'm sure it's the same with my friend Jerry at Taekwondo, which is the fact that we actually had data from all the users of the FIS app. So these are the fans who are really following the sport and who are watching all of the competitions through the app and the data and stuff, which was, we're gamers. And these were 45-year-olds. And this is what we do. We do esports. We love it. But then you also had, would you want to participate in the real sport? 5% said yes. So this was the goal. This was the goal. Even to stimulate 5% of some very, very big numbers, wow. And that's an entire 5% who would never actually participate in the physical sport. I mean, you know, what's not to tick that why box with that answer?
Thank you. I could see there, this must be music to your ears.
Yeah, it really is. I was going to mention that over the last couple of years, I've spoken to quite a few leaders in sport, traditional sport, and when I started talking to them about esports, their initial response, I think, was fear. It was fear about competition. It was fear about sedentary lifestyles. It was fear about this is stopping people from doing our thing, which is fear they already had about watching TV and going to the cinema and reading books, frankly. And it's changing. It's changing from fear to interest. I probably wouldn't go any further than that. And the interest is in the relevance of esports to a young audience. And the Olympics is probably the most powerful brand in world sport, but it's without relevance to a young audience, its future is bleak. And the IOC, in its wisdom, has woken up to this, I believe, and lots of other sports organisations are waking up to it, and they're looking at esports, they're looking at what will be happening here this weekend, and they're saying, not how can we get those people in that room to do our thing, but they're asking the question, why are all those people in that room? What is going on in there that we could replicate? We're not going to steal those people away from the thing that they love, but we might be able to learn some lessons of how they've engaged such a massive, global, diverse audience. So sport can really learn something there. I suspect there are people here in this room who spend their working days trying to work out what's the magic formula that has brought all these people to esports and how can we use it?
Stefy.
Yeah, I want to say one thing. I think the magic phrase is building and not dividing. That's the way we should look into this. And again, going back to motorsport and sim racing, we have the straight line there. You know, like there are kids that they start with the sim, and now they are in real life team that they are taking the gamers, putting in the real cars. And those guys, they win racing right off the bat. So, you know, now it becomes a talent pool. So now the real sport look at the e-sport and is like, maybe we can really try to figure it out how to get more people into our industry. And it's not only about the drivers. Now, you know, once you have the talent exposed, now you can get them to open the door and learn about engineering and learn about becoming a broadcaster and learning about how to do a lot of things that the real sport already has in place. So for me, it's always this phrase that I use often is like, we need to think about building and not dividing. And I think the GEF is really like the leader in trying to make this message out to everybody.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Stefy. Brian, I briefly want to chat to you about staging these sort of mega events in virtual spaces and physical spaces. Now, I appreciate this is a mega question, right? But the fan experience, somebody going in, doesn't necessarily want to be passive in an arena. We want to be interacting. We want to be like playing a part. How on earth do you build that in?
Well, it's a great question, right? I mean, I think that, you know, what everyone has been speaking about here is the magical aspect of what makes esports special and gaming special is it is global. It's a global audience, and it's not regionalized. It's not really localized in many respects. There's only one real phenomenon, you know, in entertainment. It is esports. In terms of how somebody in Poland can be connected with somebody in Singapore and in China and Des Moines, Iowa, right? I mean, it's like the globalization of esports and gaming is something that I've never seen. And I don't think we've seen it just in entertainment in general or sport. And so as a designer, you know, what we're always trying to do is how do you create or how do you lower the barriers of entry for people to enter anywhere, right? And like the next couple of days will be amazing here because we'll have an incredible in real life competition. There will be an audience. It'll be amazing. But how do we translate that right to a broader audience? You can do that through traditional, you know, streaming formats, of course. What we're looking at though is how do you create a digital twin environment. So like when we design a stadium or an arena, we're designing that in a really using like complex modeling, right? So we build a building today, what you actually have is you have a digital model that's been created. That's how a contractor is able to build and construct a building like, you know, like Tottenham Stadium, right? It's super complex. But it's really no different than what you see in a gaming engine. Honestly, and when you apply materials and light, you create basically a digital replica of what you see in the real world. What we find really fascinating as designers is how do we actually take these venues we're designing for the real world and put them into a metaverse environment, right? Or Web3, whatever we're going to call it, and allow not only somebody to go into a physical building here in Birmingham, London, what have you, Milan, or what happens when somebody that's 12 years old in Shanghai that may never in their life have an opportunity to go to that place in person can step into a metaverse environment and actually have a simulated experience. That's pretty exciting. And what it does is it allows you to have an event for 25 or 100,000 people, but then completely unlocks that to millions of people, millions upon millions of people that can share that experience. And that's really exciting when you think about the power of the possibilities. And as an architectural designer, that's the thing that gets me up every morning is to sort of imagine those possibilities. But I think as an industry, again, as we think about the potential that esports and gaming provides, I think it provides that more than anything at a traditional sports level. Esports and gaming has essentially been able to find that real recipe that crosses over into pop culture, that crosses over into essentially every aspect of mainstream media, content creation, and ultimately communications. And they've done that better than anyone. I think that's why traditional sports is looking at esports to try to unlock and solve those problems. But I think that we will do that certainly on many different levels. But what I was specifically speaking to related to unlocking the virtual experiences are going to be a really critical part of that as well.
Brilliant. My goodness, thank you.
Yep. Brian, if I could just sort of build on that last point you made, which is its ability to transcend so many different cultures and subcultures, I think does make esports unique. But I think it also causes one problem, which is, the policy landscape and the way things work, it doesn't fit such an interesting new beast. And to take an example, in some of the countries we work, the National Olympic Committee will be interested in looking after their national elite esports athletes. The National Sports Agency or Ministry might say, actually, we only care about physical activity, so actually we care about the active esports bit. The tourism ministry might say, actually, we just care about the events and the footfall and the blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And I think right at the beginning of the day, someone was talking about, can we have a ministry of esports one day? But there is something unique about this beast that makes it very, very hard to, find the enabling, supporting policy of everyone getting together and being able to collectively support it. And I think that's both a strength, and I think that disruption is incredibly powerful and actually potentially starts to shape the future of policy frameworks generally for traditional sports and others. But also, I think it can cause stutters, can cause that sort of there not being a home, as it were. But perhaps that's exactly what it's supposed to be and what it does. But I think there is definitely a need for some disruption to be matched on the policy side to really enable and actually fulfill the great potential of esports that everyone has been talking about all day. I don't think there's any doubting about the fact that this can do things that nothing else can. But can we enable it to actually achieve that and support it while doing it safely, while doing it, by mitigating the downsides?
That's a really interesting point. I mean, policy and regulation always does lag behind technology. And I've seen this many a time when you're creating something. It takes a little while for regulations to catch up unless you've got the drive, the vision, the determination to try and move forward and then work out what to do on the fly, which I know we kind of seen very fast-moving stuff happen here. I want to briefly ask you, Mario, before I do my wrap question, about how obviously, we've mentioned people are consuming media differently. Are we seeing a shift in the contracts as well that operate around broadcasting, mega events? Is it digital first? Is there something different happening there? Do you happen to know anything about that?
Well, actually, it's a revolving world, as we say now. And nowadays, not only the youth of the world, but everybody wants to see what they want to see, where they want to see it, at when they want to see it, and on what device. So I think digitally, the world is certainly going in that direction. Esports follows along those lines, and that for us is very important. And along those lines, I think, and just as a closing mention here, one of the things that I think we could use the digital world, we could use the communication We talked about innovation earlier this morning. There was a lot of talk about that. But I also think we're in an era we need to communicate more. People, perhaps in our generation, they don't know enough about esports. Friends that have kids in high school, or they're like, oh, my kid, he spends all this time on video games. This is not good. It's like, oh, they don't know enough about this movement. So I think as a joint venture, we need to communicate more the benefits of esports at a equal level, of course. We need to keep that in mind. But I think more importantly, we need to make sure everybody I speak to, once you talk to them about the benefits of esports, the numbers, the industry behind it, it's not just teenagers playing video games at home. They don't see the benefits of that. More and more, we're seeing active esports interact. We're obviously the cars. So there are ways that we can integrate and communicate using digital methods to show the world the benefits of esports.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Speakers, this has been really fabulous, and I would probably like to chat for another hour, but we're going to do a little wrap, and what I've been doing is offering a choice of 2 questions for you to answer at the end of our panel. You can answer one or both of them, and you can choose. So the question is, where do you think you can help people who are attending this event today? Or what would you like people to come and talk to you about afterwards? Because this is obviously an opportunity to meet really interesting people, so you can put a call out there. So I'm going to start with you, Asahi. The questions are, so you can answer one or both, where do you think you can help people? And what would you like people to come and talk to you about?
I'm not going to turn down 2 opportunities to talk for free, but I think fundamentally, in our role with regards to GEF and so on and so forth, fundamentally, we want esports to be a successful social power more than anything else. And so whether that means finding ways to make this work as an industry, finding ways to make this work as a social empowerment tool, making this work as an inclusion tool, whatever it might be, I think our mission is, as a form of future sport ultimately, how do we make this work for the benefit of all? And I think specifically, what I would love people to come and talk to me about is, I guess, our expertise, our real expertise lies in a lot of the traditional sports as well. And as I said, the thing I think that is imperative and urgent is to find that collaborative bridge that's actually focused on a substantive why and a reason and a foresight of why we need to do this, rather than just a mere interest or a feeling like I better, talk about this esport thing, but actually genuinely engaged. So I think anyone who is also working on traditional sports side, I'd be delighted to talk to them about what we can do to try and figure that out.
Brilliantly done. Nice and concise as well, Asahi. Thank you very much. Phil, what would you like people to come and talk to you about? And or where do you think you can help?
I think I'll just take the one question, which is how I think I and my organisation at Sport England can help. And I'll refer back to some of the mistakes that the traditional sport industry has made over the years that we're now trying to correct. I think that the learning we have in sport from making mistakes on governance, on diversity, on safeguarding and the treatment of athletes are all valuable lessons that esports can learn. I'm delighted to hear what Mario said about the Global Federation and the impressive start that they've made. I know that colleagues are here from British esports, and I know that they are doing good things in this country. And I'm sure that they'll be the first to say, as Mario would, they can always do more. So I'll be delighted if we can lend our expertise or point them to some of the answers that we found by getting it wrong.
Oh, lovely. Thanks, Phil. Brian, over to you. Oh, a little round of applause. You see, you've got your crowd there. So what would you like people to come and talk to you about afterwards, or how would you like to help people attending the event? Or both?
Well, I'll try to take both really quickly, but I think that, when we look at helping people, ultimately what I will always want to strive to do is lowering the barrier of entry, right? And allowing more people to have access to esports and gaming, but ultimately bringing people together to do what they love, right? And that's sharing experiences. And if there's one thing that we learned over the course of the last few years, it's that sharing experiences together is the most important thing that we could ever want, right? It's part of our human DNA. It's never going to go away. And so allowing more people to share experiences together is a fundamental driver that I will always champion. In terms of conversations, I would love to speak with anyone that's interested in collaborating at any level. I love working with artists. I love working with designers. I love working with organizations that have bold goals or visions for how they can bring something to life, whether it's architecture or an event experience, or even just some sort of collaborative creative project. So come find me. But that's how I'd answer that question.
Thank you very much. Okay, Sarah, briefly, which one would you like to do? I'm aware of the time. How would you like to help, or what would you like people to come up to you and say?
I put both questions together in one answer to make things efficient, LJ.
Brilliant.
And my mission is to contribute back to society through the power of sport, and to try to do so much that perhaps from sport we've learnt from, and we can make things better. Diverse society, safeguarding, improved governance, sustainability, and through connecting the network, and this is what we're sitting here today talking about, World Connected, Commonwealth Esports Forum, Global Esports Federation, these are their missions. And this is something through having been involved within the governance of international sport around the world for 30 years, that I really have a big network in order to be able to do that and to bring this divergence together. Sports, esports, society, it's a level playing field. Once we're on the field of play, it's a level playing field. And very much listening to Philip Wirt-Müller, the director of UNESCO, responsible for sport. Here, we all need to work together, and I can help you contribute to do that.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Oh, that's lovely. Very briefly, Stefy, what would you like to do to help? What would you like people to talk to you about?
Yes,
then
I
we're
will
going to
be
go
brief.
to Mario, and then we'll close.
Yes, I will be brief. So what we can help is for anybody that still don't know what esport can be and what kind of emotion can give you, come and try a sim. Because I guarantee you that you will have a big smile on your face and you're going to start to understand why it is so exciting. And what people can come and ask me, basically any question. GEF and everybody that is involved with the GEF is all about inclusion, diversity, accessibility, and equity. So just come and ask how you can be part of this, and happy to answer.
Thank you so much. Okay, the last word goes to you, Mario.
Well, I spoke quite a bit about different aspects, but I think one of the important things that I'd like to discuss with people, and this is my mission with the Global Esports Federation, is how we integrate the traditional sports with esports. I think we're in the right direction. The Commonwealth Esports Championships, we're having the South American Championships later this year, hopefully next year the Pan American. But we need to look at the way ahead. Asia, for example, they have completely integrated within the Asian Games. So why should the Esports Federation of a particular country be different than that country's athletics federation or gymnastics federation? I know that's a tremendous issue in all over the world, in the sense of trying to get funding the same way they get from their governments for esports as opposed to the traditional sports. So I think we all have our little pieces of the puzzle to put together, but I think the ultimate goal will be that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. And panelists, I said we could keep talking. We probably went a little bit over. Thank you, audience, for your understanding as well. And the next panel will be with Kern in just a few minutes' time. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.